Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Colonna, and this is Nashville. The results are in for the 2024 election. Regarding the presidency, millions of Americans across the country are elated. There's also millions of Americans who are upset. State and local races were also decided, leaving similar feelings of happiness and disappointment. This election cycle was something we've never seen before in modern times. Unprecedented is a word that gets tossed around a bit too much, in my opinion, but I feel that this is the appropriate word for the times that we're in currently. People on all sides of the political aisle have thrown their blood, sweat, tears, and hard-earned money into the political direction they feel most closely aligned with their own values, morals, ethics, and choices. And as all elections go, the result leaves some joyful and some unsettled. This is where we are, right here, right now. Our mission at This Is Nashville is to provide a platform and space for people with different views, experiences, opinions, and values to talk with one another, to explore where there's some sense of familiarity, a place where common ground is broken and a foundation of understanding can be established and built upon that ground. A common ground that, regardless of who you voted for, we all have to live on. So we're going to open up the phone lines to hear from you. How are you feeling this post-election day? You can call us up at 615-760-2000. That's 615-760-2000. Joining me now to help break down and understand the results from the many elections last night are Holly McCall, editor-in-chief at the Tennessee Lookout, Tony Gonzalez, newsroom director here at WPLN, and Dr. Ian Shapiro, professor of political science at TSU. It's good to see you all. Thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here. I'm glad it's a radio show and not TV.
Yes, indeed. Now, Dr. Shapiro, you just stepped out of the classroom to be here with us today, and we thank you for that. Can you answer this for me? What was the energy in your classroom like? How are your students responding to the election results?
Great question. So in the classroom, students yesterday, right, so there's a distinction between yesterday and today, they were following kind of that nauseously optimistic point of view. Election happens, it didn't go the way that a lot of them wanted it to go. And today, the time was set aside for listening to students, trying to understand how they were feeling and what they were thinking, what they were curious about. They knew it was going to be a toss-up election. They didn't quite know that so many of the swing states would all go in the same direction. That was surprising to a lot of them. And they all had their own theories for why the election turned out that way. And so I'll give you an example. I didn't teach this course today, but in my campaigns and elections course, we're reading a book, Learning from Loss by Denver political scientist Seth Maskett, where he looks at why Democrats lost in 2016 and the internal party conversations that went on trying to find a narrative to answer that question. And we've been applying those narratives, right? Is it about something about the candidate, something about the campaign that they ran, or something about the mood of the public that kept them from winning? So we're trying to take those political science theories and apply them to what students are experiencing and seeing right now in class. And I think using this as a teachable moment with the guardrails that we've brought to students in class over time, I think that's a really useful use of class time, just to help them understand the world and get rid of that complexity with some understanding.
Can you give us a breakdown of who was in your class, the type of students who were there?
So TSU is an HBCU, so most of our students are non-white. There's a pretty 50-50 gender distribution. And students were curious about the difference between kind of the enthusiasm and energy that they had seen from Kamala Harris among their tightly knit social networks and what they were seeing on national television. We brought up the New York Times map with all of the red arrows kind of jettisoning in the red direction over to the right relative to where they were in 2000. And we used that as a opportunity to explain that this shift rightward was something national. it wasn't necessarily something that was only confined to the swing states where campaigning was going on. And so we use that as an opportunity to talk about how national trends and dislike of an unpopular incumbent or concerns about inflation can really be shifting individual level decisions more so than any particular campaign rally, not getting someone out to vote on November 5th.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Let's take a look at the results from last night, local, national. We had some observations. As Dr. Shapiro, as you looked over the presidential results, as you look over them, what really stands out to you?
What stands out to me is the wide results of, across urban areas, rural areas, red states, blue states. Everything shifted 3 to 4 points, it seems, to the right relative to where we were in 2020. A lot of political scientists would say that the fundamentals of the presidential election led to this. That's concerns about the economy, filtering into someone's approval or disapproval of the incumbent president. In this case, it would have been the incumbent president's party. And so if you want to link some kind of a campaign activity to these forces, you might be able to argue that maybe Kamala Harris did a poor job of distancing herself from the unpopular aspects of the Biden administration. And that could explain a nationwide shift to the right that we're seeing.
Okay. As we look at the state and local races that have taken place, Marsha Blackburn had a big margin win. Tony and Holly, what are your reflections on that?
I was not surprised by anything I saw in the state elections. Excuse me. Journalists typically pre-write their news stories for election night, and that is so you can post them as soon as the results come in, as soon as the Associated Press calls the election. And, I never thought, and I don't think I'm the only one who felt like Gloria Johnson had more than an uphill battle. I think that she went in as the underdog, and there was just, I don't think there was a realistic expectation that she would win. And she lost, I'd written that story a week ago or more that she would lose. By the time I got around to looking at some of these state house races, Democrats had thought they could flip up to 4 seats, but at a minimum 2, and they ended up not flipping any. And there was only one surprise in those results for me. There was a Memphis state house race where Memphis businessman Jesse Huseth, he's a Democrat, was running against John Gillespie. Gillespie's a Republican incumbent who came out very tough on crime and really angered a lot of people in the Memphis area last year. When he flipped on a bill, he had promised the family of Tyree Nichols, the Memphis man who was beaten by police and died. He'd promised them he wouldn't do something. He did. He was thought to be an easy pickoff, and Jesse Huseth lost to him by 5%, which is a not insignificant margin. Other than that, abortion voters didn't seem to turn out. People who were in support of reproductive rights. Allie Phillips in Clarksville ran out of her own experience having to seek an abortion in another state when she had her baby died within her. She lost by 10%. And so, Democrats in Tennessee like to say that Tennessee is not a red state. It's a non-voting state. It is true that we have the lowest voter turnout in the country, but Tennessee is a red state. And even when Democrats were in power years ago, it was still a conservative state.
Tony?
Yeah, well, and on the turnout point, Tennessee often ranks really low for voter registration, for turnout. It does look like that was the case again this year. We saw sort of the latest numbers this morning. About 3 million Tennesseans cast a ballot. That doesn't even quite match the 2020 turnout.
Okay.
And this is something we're watching closely because, first off, we were watching early voting. Early voting was down in Tennessee. So then we're like, okay, well, will we make that difference up on election day? There were some signs, like in Nashville, like in the morning, there were long lines. The turnout was looking pretty good in Nashville, but even in Nashville, the turnout didn't match 2020. So, yeah, I don't know. For whatever reason, there just wasn't enough energy to push the turnout numbers in a meaningful direction. Of course, individual voters are very motivated, and while we talk about the macro and these big numbers and the big shifts, like a lot of our reporters are out there talking to individuals at the polls. And yeah, each individual has their strong thing they care about, whether it's reproductive rights or the economy. We heard a lot about the economy. We heard a lot about border security. But yeah, when you add it all up, not a meaningful difference this year at least in terms of how red Tennessee is.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you so much. All right. We opened up the phone lines and you all are coming through and calling. We've got Kara in Gallatin. Kara, thank you for calling. What do you want to share with us?
Hi. Thank you, Khalil. It's Tara with a T.
Tara. Sorry.
That's okay. I enjoy your show tremendously, and thank you so much. I'm a Harris supporter, and of course, I'm disappointed. That being said, the MAGA wing, they won and they won big. And now farmers like me, we say that the hens are coming home to roost. And I'm just waiting to see now if America will actually realize what the draconian policies of that wing of the party are going to do to everyday Americans. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Tara, can I ask you a question? You said you're a farmer, right?
Yes, sir.
Have you talked to anybody in your community about the election results?
Yes, sir. Up in Gallatin, we were the only Harris sign on the road. You could put it that way in our farming community, and I have farmers on three sides of me. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Did you all ever, at any point in the election cycle, talk about the election, or was it a kind understanding between neighbors not to bring up politics?
Well, actually, we've become quite alienated. I'm sad to say, from our neighbors. And what became apparent is that there was no place for even civil discord or discussion about issues facing our country, because we couldn't even settle on agreed upon facts to discuss together. So it just goes to show how the misinformation is so pervasive in everybody's news silos that we're in.
Yeah. Before I let you go, just tell me one thing. What are you hoping for?
Well, I'm hoping, of course, I really wanted Harris to win and just, down ballot Democrats. I really believe that our country is doing wonderful. We are going in the right direction. I'm better off, as are many people around me, than they were 4 years ago. And I'm hoping that, like I said at the open, at a certain point, we just got to let the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, we have to let people see how disastrous these policies are going to be. I feel like we have this, protective instinct where we want to keep the quote unquote guardrails on, but they've got to be shown out for what they really are.
All right. I really appreciate you calling in and sharing your thoughts and comments with us. Thank you so much, Tara. Have a great one, okay?
Thank you. You as well.
All right. Okay, we're going to go to another call. We've got Carrie in Emboro. I believe that might be Murfreesboro. Carrie, thank you for calling, my friend. What would you like to share with us?
Yeah, thank you for taking the call, and then I appreciate the work that you guys put in. From my point of view, I just think it's really interesting, and in terms of viewing what motivated voters for this election at the national level and then at the local level. And it didn't seem like a positive message was what motivated people, and it seemed that negativity and kind of a retribution was what motivated people, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Tony?
Yeah, that's really an interesting comment. When our WPLN reporters are out there at the polls talking to voters, we often ask them what they think about the tenor of the campaign, or are there any ads or mailers that kind of caught your eye? And in the past, I feel like we always heard voters saying like that they're tired of the negativity, or they wish the campaigns could be more positive or something. We actually didn't really hear that as much. I think people were maybe just resigned this time that like, yeah, this is the divisiveness. This is the tone and tenor that we're hearing out there. So in all of the voters we talked to, I don't think I have a single one this time, a single quote this cycle that was anyone even at this point pretending to want it to be more positive. It does seem like the negativity is just pervasive.
I have been working in politics and journalism for 37 years now, and that entire time I hear people say, we don't like negativity, we don't like these negative direct mail pieces, it doesn't work. But the fact of the matter is, it does work. And that's why candidates continue to send out negative mailers and tear down their opponent, and sometimes in ways that are fair and sometimes ways that not necessarily are. But the fact is, negativity works, and it worked this time. Fear inspires people to vote more than hope does.
Break that down for us, Dr. Shapiro.
So I would adjust that ever so slightly to say that the emotion that's really motivating people is not fear necessarily, but anger. Okay, that's the negative emotion that I think if you really want turnout in your favor, that's the emotion, anger, that you want these ads, these negative ads to influence. Because with anger, you're pointing out that there's some kind of threat out there, and you're giving people a very clear directive about how to stop or mitigate that threat. And in this case, it's the threat is the other political side, and you can vote for our side. And so you give very clear instructions in that way. Fear can lead to anger and make people aware of the opinion leaders pointing out how to deal with the threat. But the core emotion that gets people to actually stand up and go physically to the polling place, that's closer to anger.
Is that a part of a desire for self-preservation when folks are looking at who to vote for and sides to take politically?
It's more an acknowledgement at the individual level that you feel like your self-preservation, is under threat. But the core part of anger is that it's a negative emotion that you're being told very clearly how you can deal with it. And in the era of politics where mobilization is a big part of winning elections, anger can really be that emotional juice that gets someone out to the polls when they otherwise wouldn't care about politics.
All right, thank you. Carrie, let me ask you this. I'm going to ask you the same thing that I asked Tara previously. What have your conversations with your neighbors and community members been like this election cycle?
I mean, the Rutherford County, Murfreesboro area always tends to trend a little more right of downtown, Nashville and some of the neighborhoods that are closer into the Nashville community. Maybe this was me being a little naive, but I had really thought that, we were going to see a little bit more of a blue shift from Rutherford County. But I think that was probably, just my own personal bias.
Yeah. Are you worried that these election results will create a permanent disconnect with your neighbors and community members?
A little. I think also, too, it's more of just almost like an identity crisis of, Americans looking ourselves in the mirror and asking if this is, the messaging and identity of, at this point, I guess what we chose to be and elect.
Yeah, I understand that. Thank you so much for giving us a call and sharing your thoughts with us. Really appreciate it, okay?
Yeah, thank you as well.
Of course. And, something interesting, because, the Harris campaign was about joy and hope. So was Obama's. Not much negativity on that side. Does anger only work with one side of the political spectrum?
So it can work on the other side as well. There are some books that show, and some articles out there that show different emotions, do disproportionately trigger different ideological groups. Where like irony and kind of finding the fun in a complex problem can be motivating and fun and interesting for Democrats, and Republicans maybe react a little bit more quickly to outrage and very clear instructions that get them from point A to point B. So there can be differences in who's responsive to these things, but there's nothing technically hardwired about some individuals over another that, everybody gets angry. Everybody responds the same way to anger.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have more analysis from the election, and we'll continue to take your calls. We want to hear from you about how you're feeling about the results now that they're in. You can call us up at 615-760-2000. And if you are on the line with us, like Bridget, hold on, Bridget. We're going to come to you when we come back from this break. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil A. Kulona, and this is Nashville. We are examining and reacting to the results from last night's election. From the national to state and local elections, there is a lot to dissect, particularly the emotions around this election cycle. And as I said before, many people are happy and many are upset. Emotions for folks are varied. Now is the time for folks, let people feel what they're feeling. Don't avoid it. Don't run from it. Face the emotions and get ready to keep on living, because that's the only choice any of us have to make. All right, we want to hear from you. How are your post-election day? How is it going? You can call us up, 615-760-2000, 615-760-2000. And with us for the hour are Dr. Ian Shapiro from TSU, Holly McCall from the Tennessee Lookout, and Tony Gonzalez from the WPLN Newsroom. Thanks to you all for being here. And as promised, Bridget, we got you. You held on so patiently. Thank you for holding on. What would you like to share with us?
Of course. Thanks for taking my call. I am a PhD student at Vanderbilt. I just wanted to kind of share the feeling on campus this morning of a quiet sadness. I think folks didn't really want to talk about it. They didn't really know how to talk about it. But there was definitely some anxiety and sadness. And then this other layer, I think a lot of young people are, they're maybe upset with the election results, but also anxious about a lot of Trump's promises related to getting rid of the Department of Education, to limiting immigration, and further restricting reproductive freedoms. A lot of unknowns that I think people are just sitting with today, especially young people who are going to inherit this post-Trump society. So,
how are you feeling?
A mix of all of that. Definitely worried. Very hopeful with the community that I have here in Nashville that I think are going to continue to persist despite what President-elect Trump decides to do. But gonna take today to sit with those feelings for sure.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Bridget. Really appreciate it. Have a good day. Okay.
You too. Bye.
All right. Okay, so we will get back to a little bit more national election work and whatnot. But Tony, we want to turn our attention right now to the Davidson County Transit Referendum. It passed by a pretty large margin. Tell us this, what are some of the actual projects now that it's here? Nashville's finally going to get transit. We're going to get sidewalks. I know I need one. What are some of the projects that are going to come out of this decision?
I'd love to know if you're getting your personal sidewalk out of this, Khalil.
That'd be great.
We'll have to see if it's on the map. Yeah, well, I do want to emphasize that point. It passed with 66% support. That's essentially 2-1, 2 in favor for every 1 against, which is a really big margin. In fact, that's a bigger margin than like the Republican wins in those political contests. So yeah, it was really popular this time around. Very different than in 2018 when the transit proposal was defeated at that point. So what's on the project list there? I mean, it's a major expansion of bus service. So it's running more frequently, running longer hours, in fact, 24/7. Now, not right away. It's going to take years to make that happen, as well as certain bus lines that will be bus rapid transit. They talk about it acting almost more like a light rail train. So, I mean, it's like a bus that it's going to be there on a set schedule on these main corridors. Other than the bus, the proposal calls for overhauling like 600 traffic signals so that they'll be better synchronized, so that traffic will flow better, 86 miles of sidewalks, new transit centers, so like not just having a bus stop, but actually having like a place where you can wait for the bus, like these sort of bigger hubs. I mean, it'll just look nothing like what we have right now, which is, mostly benches and buses that don't run overnight and that sort of thing. So that's the whole idea, and it will be paid for through the sales tax. Again, this was the big question for voters. Like, are all these ideas, is this big project list worth this increase to the sales tax? And you can see that voters said yes.
Okay.
So that's what we're looking at. It is going to take a lot of time, though. We're not going to see any of these changes, not even in the next year.
Yeah.
And in fact, the mayor had an availability this morning where he's reminding folks this is a 15-year program. So it's going to take some time before we start seeing some of that. 86
and a half miles of sidewalk for my personal sidewalk. The mayor comes on every month. I'll ask him about it. Sure. Okay, so we're going to go to another phone call. We got Ben in Spring Hill. Ben, thank you so much for giving us a call. What would you like to share with us, my friend?
Hey, look, thanks for having me on. I love your show. I think it's fantastic. But I got to be honest with you. I'm 30 minutes into listening to this episode, and this just kind of seems like a pretty obvious example of the ideological bubble that cost Harris an election, right? Like, you guys are sitting here talking about how are we feeling about an election that was decided in large majority by individuals that are not considering feelings when it comes to governance. They're considering just standard governance. And I got to be honest, it seems like if Democrats can't turn away from the let's look at ourselves and how we feel in our ideologies and turn back to, hey, what is the average American actually going through and not what we think they should be going through or think they should be perceiving how they're going through what they're going through, then they have a real shot at another election. So thank you very much. But I just really hope that we can kind of pivot away from how are we in our very specific selves feeling and focus on how should our nation just be governed outside of our abstracted feelings?
I appreciate that. Holly, you want to say something?
I will jump into that because there's a saying, and I appreciate him bringing that up. There's a saying that facts don't care about your feelings and facts aren't feelings. But the truth of the matter is that many people do vote on their feelings. For instance, I could produce a number of studies, data points that show that the economy is doing very well. Inflation, we do have some inflation, but factually, the economy looks good. That is not, however, what people are feeling in their everyday life. And they are being affected. They feel like they're being affected. They are being affected. And so I think there is a disconnect between facts and feelings. And Ben, I understand what you're saying about Democrats saying, how are we feeling today? But, I think Republicans are also affected by feelings. And I don't think they might not talk about it as much or as openly, but I don't think that's limited to either side.
Mm-hmm. Well, but respectfully, aren't you kind of ignoring the fact that has an impact on messaging, right? Like, yeah, of course everybody's going to vote with their gut. That's what just happened here. But the fact of the matter is that people aren't on the conservative side, or really, I guess, in the independent or moderate side, looking at life through the how is this going to affect us in a calamitous feeling sort of way. So yeah, I will grant you your point. You're absolutely spot on. But at the same time, you're also kind of ignoring the fact that this is predominantly how Democrats have marketed their message, and it didn't work.
I understand that. Dr. Shapiro.
So one of the trajectories that I think you may be onto is this idea of popularism, that like if only parties could get their finger on the pulse of the public, really get good data about what policies people are asking for and which ones they think are going to positively affect their life in a very material kind of like logical, rational sense, and less like feeling kind of squishy sense, that would be the raw material for them to build a message off of. And that is going to be part of the discussion that we see Democrats having in the following weeks about how to recalibrate, whether they need to double down on their base or like find new potential coalition partners to bring in. And once they've made that choice, they're going to start trying to figure out what policy positions are feasible over the next 4 years and which ones they want to place as their kind of pie in the sky messaging as they roll into, a 2028, if you can even imagine a year that far from here.
Ben, I'm sorry. Let me ask you a question, Ben. Would you really like it for both of the political parties to kind of evolve their stances to open up and to bring more people into the fold? Because the way I see it is every election cycle, either midterm, local, or national general elections, we've got both political parties pander to their bases, which I think is definitely a lot about the emotions that are happening, the feelings that are people happening, the feelings that conservative Republicans may be experiencing, the feelings that Democrats may be experiencing. And there's a lot of emotion to draw up the energy, but not much addressing of the facts that you so eloquently stated when you told us about your comment at the very beginning. That only happens when the nominees are decided and people kind of come to what they call the center. Would you like to see the parties take a platform where that's where they approach it from the beginning of the election cycle?
Oh, my God, yes. Look, if you want my honest opinion, if Democrats don't dump the progressive wing of their party and have them picking their primary candidates, which is exactly how we kind of got into the exact problem that we're in the first place, we're going to continue to see conservative landslides like this. And the reason for that is because progressives are telling people how to think and feel. Not so much, hey, you can't appreciate this in the way you want to. It is entirely, if you don't appreciate this, and you fall into one of these really awful categories that most people don't like being called. I don't know a single person that voted for Trump that's a Nazi, and I don't know a single person that voted for Trump that's a racist. All of my family and myself are Latino, and yet most of the people I know and am related to voted for Trump. So is this idea of just progressivism being a driving force in primaries that leads to these abstracted candidates that are pretty far away from the center is kind of the problem that at least the Democrats are having. I mean, Republicans have their own things to sort, but this is a Democrat loss. So, yeah, it would be beautiful if the Democrats and Republicans went back to sitting in the center and trying to appeal to the majority of people rather than telling people how they need to feel or appreciate the world around them.
I hear
If you
that.
want something that really off-put all of the moderates in my circle, it was the fact that Biden look, I'm happy to argue statistics, but this is not my show. But Biden tells us that the economy is doing great. Yeah, when you adjust for the numbers of wealth that's brought into people that are not middle and lower class, sure, it is doing great. But it's absolutely horrible for people out there that are counting pennies to buy bread and telling people that everything is transitory and then, it's good for you, and then yada, yada, yada for years is gaslighting. That's just absolutely objectively horrible, and that's to sort of tell people how to feel rather than start in the middle and appeal to everyone's pre-existing feelings. I hope that is fair enough of an assessment.
I hear where you're coming from, Ben. Really appreciate your calling and adding your insight to the program. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good one, my friend, okay?
You too, sir. Thank you.
All right. Okay, we're going to go to another call. We got Matt in Portland, Tennessee. First time caller from Portland. Matt, what would you like to share with us?
Well, first of all, I appreciate your show. I listen to it at work when I can quite a bit. I'm a long-time retired police officer. I've been to I'm a war vet, and I've also been a long-time president of a large union. And I the first time and only time that I ever voted for a Democrat was Jimmy Carter, 1980. And I've always been kind of a pretty much as conservative most of my adult life until Donald Trump came along. And what I am appalled about where he's led the Republican Party is that they're unwilling to look at other people's opinions. And for the first time since 1980, voting for Jimmy Carter, I have voted for someone else, and I am appalled about their position on things. I don't know. I think they're leaderless.
Panel, anyone want to respond to that?
So, if you're the type of individual who thinks of themselves as, maybe more conservative and you have a track record of voting for Republicans, there is a subsection, you're not alone, of individuals who are put off by Trump. And there are things that you as individuals can do, things that the Republican Party as it stands today can still do to kind of, reshape the party and not stand by all of the particular decisions of, the president-elect who's the current head of the Republican Party. Just because you're on the same team doesn't mean that you can't find common cause on issues of, like, say, democracy or some kind of, like, economic grand deal with the other party. And it certainly doesn't mean that you have to stand by as, like, various norms are broken. We found out over the last 10 years that a lot of our country, runs on norms and not everything is written into law. And so the fact that you're kind of seeing this schism between your own values and kind of what the leader of your party, or maybe your former party, I don't want to assume, is doing, you're right to feel discomfort there. And it's good to talk about it with not just us here, but also the people in your life.
We just had a caller who talked about the progressive wing of the party and their very, very rigid views, which some people agree with. And Matt, I hear you saying that you're very upset with the conservative party by not wanting to listen to other opinions. That seems to be the case on the extremes. And I think that seems to be a case for at least people who follow politics and news have known for quite some time, many, many years, that these extremes have dominated in oftentimes the news cycle, definitely the conversation cycle that we engage in with each other. Now, I'm talking to three people, two people who are journalists, one person who is a professor. Part of the profession is to not take sides on this, to be neutral, to understand, to facilitate and foster conversations like the ones we're having today. But personally, let me ask you all this. When it comes to these obstinate beliefs of not being able to listen to another opinion, how does that make you all feel?
Wow. Well, I will say, when our reporters are out there talking to voters at the polls, we are hearing a lot of, like, certainty and conviction from the voters. And on a small limb here, I will say I feel like there is a little bit less openness to the, what is the whole realm of possibilities on a particular policy issue. Like folks are coming in convicted. And that can be hard to even have an enjoyable conversation with. Like, and I know when we're looking through, when as an editor, when I'm looking through, what are all the things that voters have told us, and what voices are we going to put on the radio? I am really intrigued when someone will admit that they have changed or evolved or learned something that changed their mind. Like that is just intriguing as a human. Like when you find that decisive moment or something that changed your mind, that's just fascinating. And I didn't find a lot of that in all the voter voices that we heard from this year. I mean, people seemed pretty set.
Yeah.
Just not as, I don't know, it's just not as much of a conversation if someone has that conviction.
Holly?
I'm processing this, and I'm thinking back actually to what Ben said about being in a bubble. But it's always interesting to me when we cover an issue and we focus on Tennessee politics and policy, and the reporters who work for the Tennessee Lookout are all complete pros at the top of their game. I don't know what their personal politics are, but it never fails that on a story that we write completely down the middle, I'm going to hear from somebody who tells me that we're a bunch of right-wingers, and usually from Democrats who will reach out to me personally and tell me, that we are a bunch of sellouts and we're too conservative and why aren't we doing more to uphold Democratic candidates? But by the same, by the same perspective, I know a number of Republicans who think that we are way too liberal and way far left. And I just think that's interesting. I don't know if that's even making any sense, but that's kind of how I look at things. Yeah.
Dr. Shapiro.
When I see political disagreement coming my way head on like a freight train, I have to change my entire state of mind. I know that this conversation is not going to be productive if it's a game of tug of war. It's got to be more like a three-legged race where we need to get on the same team, know that we want to head in the same direction. That's about establishing shared values, even if you have disagreements on issues or even have a hard time coming to similar facts on a particular topic. A strategy that I think is really good is the old Ted Lasso approach, right? Be curious, not judgmental. Ask questions. What do you believe? Why do you think that's the case? What evidence could I provide to you for you to change your mind? Let someone express themselves while at the same time, let them find the limits to their own knowledge, right? Let them find some of their own intellectual humility while you learn about where they came to that conversation from.
Well, really, thank you for that. Matt, they really appreciate you calling, appreciate you listening, okay? We're going to move on. We're going to take a quick break and keep on holding it down out there in Portland. All right, Matt?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we're going to take one last break. When we come back, we're going to come back to more of your calls about the 2024 election. You know you can call us at 615-760-2000. That's 615-760-2000. This is Nashville. We'll be right back. I'm Khalil A. Colonna, and this is Nashville. We are talking about the 2024 general election. We're getting your calls to get a sense of how you're feeling and where you're at and what you're thinking right now. My guests are Dr. Ian Shapiro with TSU, Holly McCall with the Tennessee Lookout, and Tony Gonzalez with WPLN. And if you want to call to join this conversation, a really good conversation, I might add, give us a call at 615-760-2000. That's 615-760-2000. You can call us up just like Lisa from Brentwood. Lisa, thank you so much for calling. What would you like to share with us?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for having this topic today. It's very important to me, I'm sure to others. A couple comments quickly. One, following on prior callers' comments about how the Democrats have to think less about feelings, and how and another caller's comments about, how we tend to be very kind of set our ways and not open to listening to other people's opinions. A lot of that comes from people coming away from mainstream media and basically focusing on one source of news. consistently, whether it be Fox or MSNBC or whatever. And it's incumbent upon all of us to hear different opinions and different sources of news in order to keep our minds open. We're very bad at not doing that. But the other comment I'd like to make is this is 2024. It's quite evident to me, and this is a very sad admission in my perspective, that a woman cannot become president of this country. We've had two very good, very qualified women run against the gentleman who won yesterday and lost both times. And I don't for a minute believe that there were some voters out there that tacked red or tacked right for any other reason than that they could not see a woman take that job. And I'll take the rest of the comments offline if you care.
Let me ask you one question before you go, Lisa. Where do you go for other sources of news outside of Fox News or MSNBC?
New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, the Tennessean. You should see our house. We're full of a lot of magazines and newspapers, the Atlantic, the New York Magazine. My husband likes to read a lot.
Lisa, I think you should also be listening to WPLN and reading the Tennessee Lookout.
I do. We do. Yes, we do. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for giving us a call, Lisa. She said something very interesting about the media. And, it's an experiment that I did last night when I got home after our 7 p.m. show. I turned on the television, made sure, obstructed my vision so I couldn't read the chyrons and the graphics. And I was just flipping through all the channels to see the emotional reaction of the hosts and anchors to get a sense of who was winning the election. It was quite telling. It was quite telling to see that a lot of, particularly the cable, major mainstream media, cable news networks, definitely have their slant and their lean. Very few are coming directly down the middle and trying to give us the facts, as the Tennessee Lookout and WPLN News is doing. What would you all like to see change when it comes to the mainstream media and its approach to discussions about politics?
So maybe I'll be the baseline that maybe people can attack. Is I actually tend to like that. For the most part, there's a decent amount of separation between the anchors and the live coverage and the decision desks that actually occur, that crunch the numbers and make the calls. People's emotional facial reactions, right, could be a dead giveaway about perceived or real slant of those media organizations. But for the most part, they're also businesses. And so they have, selected into hiring individuals and getting a mix of people that are appealing to the audience that they want to serve, right? There's a reason why you have the ability to flick between channels. It's because there's a lot of different audiences and markets out there that they want to serve a particular flavor, but at the end of the day, they're all getting the same meal, and that's the accurate election outcome as judged by the decision desks, given the data that's coming in.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you for that. We got a couple more minutes left. I'm going to try to fit a few calls in here. I've got Carrie in Antioch. Carrie, thank you for giving us a call. What would you like to share, my friend?
Well, I just want people to understand that governments don't move fast. When Obama left office, he left Trump in a good condition. When Trump left office, he left Biden in a bad condition. Now that Biden's leaving office, he's going to leave Trump in a good condition again. So everybody's going to go see how wonderful Trump is. But you have to wait a couple of years to see what how his plans really affect the country.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
All right. Thank you for sharing that, my friend. I really appreciate it. Have a great day. We're going to move on to Vivian in Nashville. Vivian, what would you like to share?
Hi. I guess I would just want to say that I'm so disappointed, and I feel a bit ashamed that we're going to have a president who so openly shows us that he is morally bankrupt. And character to me matters a lot because Congress can sort out a lot of the policies. But a president should be someone we look up to and respect, and we're proud to call our president. And I'm so ashamed to have a person in office who I'm not proud of.
I understand where you're coming from, Vivian. Really appreciate you giving us a call. But there's also millions of Americans who are very proud of who just was elected for president. Again, it goes to show we have over 300 million people in this country. That means there's 300 million different Americas. We've all got to find a way to live in the same one together. Really appreciate you giving us a call, Vivian. Have a beautiful day. Okay, we're going to do a quick call to Mary. Mary, you've been waiting for nearly 20 minutes. Thank you for waiting patiently out in Clarksville. What would you like to share? Mary, you with us? Maybe Mary couldn't wait anymore. Man, too bad. Mary, please call us again. Really apologize about that. Okay, I got John in Gordonsville. John, we got a couple minutes left. Please share your comments with us briefly, my friend.
Well, yeah, I just, a couple things. For one thing, this farmer lady that spoke earlier, that she was better off now than she was 4 years ago, and I find that hard to believe unless she raises her own chickens for eggs and beef for meats and raises her own vegetables. Going to the grocery store nowadays, I mean, you have to choose pretty well to find out whether or not you're going to be able to afford this or that, or maybe not buy something because it's too expensive. I mean, the eggs have gone up, crazy and so I was buying groceries 4 years ago, and I was so much better off 4 years ago than I am today, between the gas prices and the food prices and, your power for your house and gas for your house. And, it's just phenomenal how great. Now I'm hoping that President Trump will be able to turn things around with the, gas prices and, being able to drill. And also this gentleman that just spoke, that he thought that, Trump is going to be, that he was, Biden was worse off after Biden or after Trump was elected, or when Trump went out of office and he left the things so bad. Well, I thought they were pretty good when Biden took over. So, it's kind of, you get a mixed story from people, obviously, from different sides.
We're going to get a lot of different stories because a lot of people had different experiences when it comes to the past 4 years and in part of their lives. And I really appreciate you listening in, John, and sharing your thoughts with us. Really, truly appreciate it. Okay, we're going to go to one last caller. We've got Dee Marie in Nashville. Dee Marie, you have called before. You've been waiting patiently. What would you like to share with us, sweetheart?
Oh, my God. The first thing I want to say is I'm glad the election is over. And I got up this morning and did everything that I normally do so that I could feel very normal and not off the gilded lily, okay? Mm-hmm. My prayer is that we can come together as a country. We can come together as a nation because we have to find a way forward. But this is a conversation that we should have been having before the election or during the time of the campaign so we could sensitize one another to the fact that I don't know, I don't have all the answers, and neither do they. But what I've noticed is, in so many instances, the conversations that are being had are designed to shape our opinions. Someone said that it's emotional and we're going with the emotions and then we form our opinions. No. People have tapped into the fact that they can design the conversation in such a way that it shapes our opinions, which then leads to the fear and the anger that was talked about earlier. Because when you get afraid, it has to be acted out in some way, and sometimes that leads to anger. But we now have a chance to face the reality of who we are as a nation. Can we ever support a woman for president? And we also will soon learn what happens when absolute power and control is given to someone who has promised retribution in his own words. And I rest my mic.
Thank you very much for giving us a call, Dee Marie. Okay, we've got just about a minute left. Any closing thoughts or comments from the panel?
We are going to be learning a lot about how this election shakes out in the next few days, maybe a week before everything is done, counted in places like California. And political scientists, myself included, are going to have a lot of fun understanding voting behavior and the trends that we have observed.
There's a bunch of stories to be written. Holly, how you feeling?
You know, I am looking forward to talking to Dr. Shapiro more and think we might be working with him on a story and interviewing him as a source down the road.
You got a good one right there. Tony?
Well, I'm thinking we had this huge night last night, all hands on deck as a newsroom, but now we have like so much additional work to do to figure out what's next, to figure out the policies and how it's all going to play out, and making sure that we're hearing from as big of an array of voices as possible to inform those stories. So yeah, we've got a lot of work to do.
I really want to thank all of you for being here today and for being a part of this very important conversation. My guests were Tony Gonzalez. He's the newsroom director at WPLN. Holly McCall is the editor-in-chief at the Tennessee Lookout. And Dr. Ian Shapiro is a master professor of political science at TSU. Thank you all again for being with us. And thanks to you callers for calling in. We're going to try to do more stuff like this here on this show. I'm really proud of the fact that we had so many people who are conservative who regularly listen to our show and had no fear in calling in. Thanks to you all for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. Today's episode was produced by Mary Mancini and Catherine Ceces. It was directed by Tasha A.F. Lemley. Our technical director and board operator is Liv Lombardi. The masterminds behind our theme music are Larange and Namir Blade. Special thanks to everyone who voted. We're Americans. It's our duty. You can listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get good podcasts. And the conversation does not end here. Tweet us at This Is Nashville. Find us on Instagram and tell us what you want from our show by filling out our quick survey online. You can also call to leave us a message at 615-751-2500. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil Ekolona. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. Be good to each other. We're Americans. Really be good to each other. Thanks.